Shalom. All glory, honor, and praise to the Most High God, Yahweh, and His Son, HaMashiach Yahawashi, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. Peace and blessings to all the sincere brothers and sisters out there doing this work of the Lord. I want to do a brief topic on the proper depiction of Christ and how is He described in the Bible. And one would say, well, it doesn't matter what His color looks like. And that may be true in some ways, but if His color did not matter, they would have never changed Him to be a so-called white man in the first place. They would have just left Him as He was. Revelation chapter 1, verse 1. The revelation of Yahawashi HaMashiach, Christ, which God gave unto Him to show unto His servants things which must shortly come to pass. And He sent and signified it by His angel unto the servant John. Right? So this is John the Baptist. He was also a revelator because the book of Revelation was revealed to him about the things that would take place in the latter days of the earth. Also, it was the revelation of Christ, right? Which is the revealing. Verse 13. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. So the 7 candlesticks representing the menorah, which has 7 candlesticks. And it says Christ had a garment down to the foot. Now, if you know the attire of the Hebrews, the ancient Hebrews, they wore girdles around their waists. And they also wore garments that were down to their feet. Verse 14, His head and His hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and His eyes were as a flame of fire. Right, so John the Baptist is describing Christ's hair like wool, right? That's a comparison of the texture. Now, what people have woolly hair, right? It says as white as snow. His hair was white because he was very stressed out. Because we know he was only a young age, around 30, 33 years old, what have you. And his eyes were as a flame of fire, right? So his eyes, they were red. And why is that? Because he drank a lot of wine. He was also known for turning water into wine. Verse 15. And His feet like unto fine brass, as if they burn in a furnace, and His voice as the sound of many waters. So if you look at the color of brass, brass is a derivative of brown, right? And then if you were to go ahead and put that into a furnace, obviously it would become darker. So this is in the Bible, okay? This is metaphorically speaking, but also literal, describing what Christ looked like. And that's not the only place that He's described that in the Bible. The prophet Daniel also prophesied of Christ. Daniel chapter 10 verse 5. Then I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. Verse 6. His body also was like the beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning. Right? He had a strong countenance on his face, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in the color to polished brass. So now this is Daniel prophesying Christ's arms and his feet like unto polished brass. Again, this is a derivative of brown, so it's representing a darker color. And the voice of His words like the voice of a multitude, because He had a very deep voice and was able to project Himself, which is the reason why He was able to go into synagogues and speak loudly. And also with His followers, He was able to be in the streets, the highways and the byways, prophesying and speaking the true gospel. He projected His voice. To just prove that, I want to bring a first-hand witness, right? A first-hand account of someone who lived during the time when Christ was on the earth. And let's see how he described him. This is out of the book Sex and Race by J.A. Rogers. It reads, European painters and sculptors, by their use of white models to typify biblical characters, have falsified tremendously the physiognomy of the ancient Jews. We are familiar with the scores of portraits offered to us as Christ. But do good Christians ever stop to think what He really looked like? Josephus, first century historian, described Him as dark-skinned and simple in appearance, in the Helosis suppressed portion of his work. Right? So this is a man, Josephus, who lived during the same time that Christ was on the earth. He was a servant to the Flavian family, all right, the Flavian dynasty, who were rulers during that time in Rome. It was a quote-unquote royal family. So this man is a first-hand witness. He also had a hand in some of the writings in the Bible through the transliteration, things of that nature. But this man described Christ as a dark-skinned man. And how do we know that's true? Because the ancient Romans, they had quote-unquote black slaves who were the Jews, the same way America had Negro slaves over here. It's the same analogy in a way. So this is a first-hand witness of a man who lived during the time of Christ. And in his journals, this is how he described the man. 1 Maccabees chapter 3, verse 48, and laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images. And this is what has happened throughout time. This is where the false image of Christ comes into play. Cesare Borgia, right, of 1492. Pope Alexander VI had this image painted by Leonardo da Vinci. And this was during the Renaissance period, which again takes place in the 1500s going through. And all this was painting over black images, or the images of what a lot of these ancient rulers and kings look like, the images of what the Jews look like, and most importantly, the image of the Messiah, right? Because earlier records show that he was a quote-unquote black man, right? He was a melanated person. If you look at the Russian icons, this is prior to the Renaissance time, and iconoclasm really started painting over these images, right? They all have these true images of Christ and what he looked like prior to the whitewashing that took place throughout history. Even looking at where these stories take place now, again, the Romans, they took over and sieged Jerusalem in 70 AD. But let's remember now, at this time, what we would call the Middle East now was just a part of Africa. Why? Because all these countries fall under the same tectonic plate, which is on the same continent. So the reason why people look at where Israel is now and modern day Palestine is because there's something called the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal was constructed in the 1850s, right? And what that was basically a canal that was put to create a barrier between what we consider now the Middle East and the continent of Africa. But in all actuality, it's all the same place.
North Africa, which is Israel, is separated by the Suez Canal and is not part of Africa. And this canal was dug a few days ago. Are you okay in your head? We are on the same platonic stone, Africa and Middle East. And God created a garden east of Eden. Therefore, Africa is Eden. We need to decolonize this Jesus story and throw away a white Jesus with his idols. I don't believe in a white movie star from Hollywood who is supposed to have come around and saved me from my sins. How can a white boy with blue eyes die for Africans when they cannot even share land with us? 25 million people dead in the sea on their way to America for slavery. 15 million people dead in Congo.
So what did the people that lived there during that time look like? And history proves that these people were dark-skinned, melanated people. If you look at the ancient Egyptians, these were all dark-skinned people. Egypt was even called the land of Kemet, which means black land. That's pertaining to the soil, but also is the people that lived there. They were all dark-skinned people. Christ, along with his mother and his father, they went and hid among the Egyptians. And now if the Egyptians were dark-skinned, melanated people during that time, how would Christ be able to hide among them and not stand out? Matthew chapter 2, verse 14. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt. So this is Joseph along with Mary and Christ. And they went and hid among the Egyptians. They fled out of Jerusalem and they fled out of Israel because there was prophecies that prophesied of the birth of Christ. So when Christ came into the world, there were people that were seeking after him, trying to find him and kill him even. And one of those people was Herod, right? King Herod the Great, they call him. This man was the ruler in Israel at that time, right? In Judea. Verse 15, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be filled, which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, out of Egypt have I called my son. Right? And that was prophesied in the Old Testament, that Christ would go and hide among them, and then he would arise out, come back to his land. Again, going through some of these images, none of the images that you see today are a proper depiction of Christ. Right? And what that does is it psychologically destroys our people because, okay, if you believe that your Lord and Savior is a so-called white man, then you're okay with anyone who's in a position of power of looking like that. And it psychologically denotes your position and your power and the way that you feel about yourself. If it didn't matter what his color looked like, they would have just kept him originally the way that he is prophesied in the Bible and the way that he looked.